All right, more specifics on embodied perception and cognition. The idea here is that the motor system can influence your perceptual system in a way that is fundamentally perceptual. It's not a reminder like, I'm walking slowly, that makes me think of elderly people. It's not a kind of cognitive, semantic reminder that the effects of action on perception, the effects of embodied cognition, stem from the fact that perception is grounded in the motor system. That from an evolutionary perspective, one of the reasons that we have perceptual abilities is to get around in the environment and to keep us safe. So it's not a cognitive kind of representation that it's a reminder, but it's a cognitive representation or a perceptual representation that is based in the neural architecture of the motor system. So, what do we have here? We have you sliding off the stage. Wow. All right. All right. So here's a study that demonstrates the effects of embodied cognition. In fact, 4 different studies. I'll kind of summarize them here for you. Participants were given a little clipboard like the one you see here, and you can open it up. It's got stuff inside it. And so in one condition, they were given a heavy clipboard. They just put a whole big pack of paper in there, and it was heavy. In the other condition, they were given a clipboard that was empty on the inside. And so now they have a light kind of clipboard. And what they found was that holding a heavy clipboard increased the judgments of monetary value. So they asked them about foreign currency, right? How many dollars is the British pound worth? How many dollars is a euro worth? And strange currencies, not strange, but currencies that the participants were unfamiliar with from all over the world. And it turns out that when the group that was holding the heavy clipboard had a higher judgment monetarily of the value of the foreign currency. They made participants consider fair decision making to be more important. If you're holding, it's a weighty decision, right? You're holding something heavy. They cause more elaborate thinking. It's indicated by higher consistency between related judgments. So judge these two things. How similar or different are they? And then you can have an actual subjective or objective metric of how similar they are. And it turns out that they were being more accurate, more careful in their judgments if they were holding the heavy clipboard, and a greater polarization of agreement ratings of strong versus weak arguments. So they're kind of anchored in their opinions, and this is really in line with pretty much all of the work on embodied cognition that suggests weight makes people invest more in dealing with abstract issues. When we were years ago on our honeymoon, we had a stop in Jamaica, and they were selling these little souvenirs, and they kind of looked kind of cheesy to me, but it was our honeymoon, we're going to get something, right? And so I kind of picked it up, and it was like really heavy, and I was like, my opinion of these little kind of trinkets changed dramatically because they had some weight to them, right? So it's a real thing. Now the question becomes, where do the effects come from? Are the representations linked by memory? Not saying that they don't exist like that, but the effects that we're talking about here are really grounded in the motor system. Cognitive representations consist of sensory motor activity. So the article that you read, one of them, on Tough and Tender, had 2 groups of participants. Hopefully you've read this. Read it before Wednesday. In group 1, they gave them a kind of squishy ball to squeeze and make evaluations of these faces. The judgment was simply, are they male or female faces? And group 2 had a hard ball that was really hard to squeeze, right? So they're trying to tap into the perceptual judgments of male and female faces based on influencing the motor system, right? So one group squeezes the soft ball, the tender ball. The other group squeezes the hard ball, and then they kind of judge these faces, right? So we just take a male face here, we take a female face here, we have software where we can morph them all together, and you get 10 or 12 or however many stimuli you like, and you randomly present these to participants and they say male or female, right? And what we find is that when you do the 2x2 ANOVA, so we're looking at 2 groups of participants, one gets a hard ball, one gets a softball, and we also have 2 groups of participants cut the other way by male and female participants, right? We do an ANOVA, and we find that faces were categorized as male more often by the participants who were squeezing the hard ball. And those squeezing the softball had lower rates of identifying their participants as male. Now, any differences between males and females? No. Both groups of participants in that respect had the same effects. There's no interaction. There's no main effect for the sex of the participant. Well, you don't like that study, right? It's got some problems with it. And so we're going to try to find some converging evidence. Converging evidence means we're looking at the same effect, right? We're looking at the effect of the motor system on the judgment of whether faces appear to be male or female, right? And it turns out that if you do it like in a totally different way, now we're going to have two groups. We're going to ask one to press really hard with a pen while they're circling these things because we've got carbon copies, right? This is the cover story, which was kind of pretty cool. And we're gonna, we want you to press really hard so it can go through to the second copy. You guys probably, maybe you're familiar with carbon copies, but they've gone the way of the dial telephone. But it's just a piece of black paper that if you press on it, it makes an impression on the paper below it. It's an easy way of making copies, I guess. One group says press hard because we want to make sure that we get the copy. One group says press softly because we want to reuse the carbon paper. You get the same results. Now we've got the same 2x2 ANOVA. We've got the group that pressed the pen hard, group that pressed the pen lightly, and the participants' gender, and they should have said participants' sex there, I think. But the ANOVA revealed that faces were categorized as male more often by participants who pressed hard on the paper than those by who pressed easy on the paper. So what this tells us, it provides some evidence that sensory motor activity can influence social cognition. This isn't really just like a strict perceptual, like what color is this or how loud does this sound. This is a more complex social perception. Proprioceptive experience of toughness versus tenderness influence categorization, whether you squeeze the ball or pressed hard on a pen. One of the strengths of this particular paper is it's got two completely different methods that really find the same thing. So that's what converging evidence is, right? If we can come at it from two different perspectives and find the same thing, we can be more confident in those findings. And it also supports previous work of grounded cognition. Grounded cognition is another, just a different way of saying embodied cognition. There are subtle differences, but the main idea is the same. All right. Moving through time. So in this study, participants were to either recall what everyday life was like 4 years ago or imagine what everyday life might be like 4 years from now. So think about the past, think about the future. And we're going to measure postural sway, how much the participant either leans forward or back. They put a little sensor on their leg and had these kind of really high sensitivity trackers tracking whether the person leaned forward and lean backward. All the participants were blindfolded. Why do we need to blindfold them, right? Well, it turns out that one of the ways in which you stay upright and keep from swaying or falling over is by using your visual system, right? So looking at the walls around you gives you a really strong cue to whether you're standing upright or not. The police know this, so if you were to unfortunately get stopped and had a field sobriety test, they will ask you to close your eyes and try to stand. You don't have to be inebriated to find these effects, so try it yourself. See how long that you can stand on one foot with your eyes closed. You'd be surprised at how quickly you need to put your other foot down. So that's why they were blindfolded, to get some variability in the postural sway of the participants. What did they find? They find that thinking about the future essentially makes you lean forward, and thinking about the past makes you lean backward. Now we're having the kind of opposite effect, right? We're having a cognitive kind of an imagery situation affecting the motor system. So we're going from studies in which the motor system affects your kind of social cognition to the opposite case, where the kind of cognitive process that you're engaging in influences your motor system, which suggests that the future is grounded in kind of the forward, and the past is physically forward, and the past is grounded in physically backward. So thinking about the future causes participants to lean slightly forward, and thinking about the past causes them to lean slightly backward. So I look forward to hearing your comments on this. Make sure you get your comment paper in by midnight Tuesday. If you get in before class on Wednesday, there's a 10-point penalty, but I'll still take it. I can't take them after class because the whole point of doing comment papers is so we can have something to talk about when we meet on Wednesday. I'll see you on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Take care.